Melanie Schweizer, she's a lawyer, a former senior policy advisor and civil servant in Germany, until, of course, she lost her job for speaking out against the genocide. Melanie.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for inviting me to this timely and so important event this evening. It's really an honor to be here tonight alongside such incredible voices in the fight for justice and democracy. I also want to say that I'm actually really nervous, of course, because for two things. So first, I'm new to this whole thing. I have used to be a civil servant working in the ministry behind a desk. Every now and then I did policy mainly, but sometimes I would write a little bit about a speech, but of course I would never be in front of a room talking to a lot of people and be with such incredible people on a stage. I rather prepare for it. I actually also do hold a bachelor's degree in political science, but I remember when we had the final degree event, our dean used to say the political scientist is to politics like the scientist of spiders to spiders. He actually doesn't want to have to do anything with it. And I can say it couldn't be more the truth. I actually really never wanted to do politics. I wanted to do law. I wanted to work with the constitution. And then everything changed ever since definitely 7th of October. And it was a sheer necessity out of desperation to do something, because I woke up in Germany in a nightmare and in a never-ending, I like to call it, episode of Black Mirror, daily horror by German media and by German politicians. I used to swear to myself, if something like that were to happen, I would stand up and raise my voice and do something against it. And I heard so many around me to do the same. But where are they? I'm speaking here today as someone who was fired from the German government as a civil servant last week, serving as a senior legal advisor in a federal ministry. Dismissed for exercising my fundamental rights to freedom of speech and political participation in criticizing Israel's genocide in Gaza and for denouncing the complicity of European governments in these crimes. While I was running for a political office for the German federal parliament elections with Mayor 25, the grassroots party of DM25. As I said, kind of involuntarily, but I did so because this happened in Germany, not in some authoritarian regime, not under autocratic rule, but here, right here, in the European Union. I did not break any law or incite violence. I exercised my right to freedom of expression and also my freedom to political activity, and demanded justice and peace and accountability to the state of Israel, committing war crime after war crime after war crime. A right supposedly protected under the European Convention on Human Rights, the German Constitution, and the EU Charter of Fundamental Rights. The German Federal Commissioner, however, Felix Klein, can publicly advocate for Trump's plan of ethnic cleansing, as he did 3 days ago. And when asked, the German government's response in this remains neutral, stating that this was his private opinion. The main reason in my dismissal letter is that I apparently violated the principle of moderation when expressing my opinion. Among others, an example was that I posted on X that Israel is a genocidal apartheid state. Now, when the reality has become so abhorrent and radical, opposition dissent must be marked as radical and extreme. Israel is in fact accused of committing genocide in Palestine in front of the International Court of Justice. The same court which also issued an expert opinion on the illegality of Israel's 57-year-long brutal military occupation in Palestine, resuming that there are great violations to human rights and international law and racial segregation or apartheid. And that, by the way, Israel has to get the fuck out of there immediately. Sorry for the language, but now I'm not a civil servant anymore, so I'm kind of enjoying to actually violate my principle of moderation when I express myself that I don't have. not have anymore. So, the German chancellor thought just stated recently in an interview that the claim Israel is committing a genocide is absurd, while the International Court is seeing plausible reasons. He calls it absurd. The German government and center parties are actively devaluating the international legal framework, the very framework answering to Germany's historical crimes. At the same time, lecturing other countries about human rights, democracy, and freedom rights. Across the continent and beyond in the Western world, we are witnessing a war on dissent voices, a war on activism, and a war on truth. My case is not an exception, but a systemic phenomenon. It had happened to hundreds of people in similar ways in Germany, if not thousands. It is also a part of a much broader authoritarian shift in Europe. Meanwhile, Europe governments continue to support actual war crimes, selling weapons to Israel, cozying up to far-right leaders, and expanding the surveillance state. This all tells us one thing: the center politics dragged us all into an identity crisis. The center has become right, taking over radical and right-wing rhetoric and policies. Europe experiences a rapid rise to the right while the economy is stagnant. This is the playbook of our authoritarianism. A growing discontent among the population paired with a decades-long propaganda campaign against Muslim and Arab people. And how could it not be when liberal, democratic, and conservatives wholeheartedly support the most racist, fascist Israeli government in committing a genocide? No one connects the dots. When people are being dehumanized in another country and we support it, it will inevitably backlash onto our own societies, and your own societies will become racist and fascist. Dehumanization and vilifying of the others has become the center party's new rhetoric, shamelessly so in Germany, as we saw in the last federal election. Migration is the scapegoat everyone turns to, while experiencing a huge lack of workers due to the undeniable demographic change that is reality, even though no one wants to see it. The same politicians at the very same time are going abroad and trying to win workers to come to Germany, but at the same time using migration as the number one security issue and their only campaigning issue. Divide and conquer. It seems the only industry Europe is investing in is the military complex, while bridges and buildings collapse across Europe, and hence neglecting the real needs and wishes of their own people, and thereby driving only more people to the far right, because even the far right demands an end to the endless wars, as Janis was saying before. It is but a power game of the multinational corporations and the interests of a few elites. Calling for the upholding of the international rule-based order and universal human rights has become a radical act of the extreme left. I've got some news for you. It is not. It is the consensus of our collective existence. It is the bare minimum to agree on throughout all parties. The world has changed, and social democrats and conservatives in Europe have also changed. They are not what they proclaim to stand for. This leaves, however, fertile ground for a movement of global liberation and awakening. It is time now that we reclaim the narrative. Democracy does not mean putting a cross every 4 years in the election cabin. Democracy happens in between, and not only by elected officials, but by all of us. It is misleading to think that our governments serve us justice. If you think about it, they rarely ever did. From European slave trade and colonialization to US-American segregation and South African apartheid, to only name a few atrocities from the past of our Western governments. They were not abolished because the government simply thought one day that is immoral to do so, but because brave people fought for it. Individuals who organized and put their lives on the line for it. Neither did the governments pretend the Holocaust, although everyone knew what was going on in gas chambers in Germany. States and thereby their political leaders intervened only when their power was threatened, when all the people had already been murdered. As Europeans, with our many atrocities committed in the past, we have a special moral obligation to become those individuals who stood up against their murderous governments. The mainstream media was also never there to fight oppression, but merely to amplify the voice of the oppressor, as Katie was already mentioning. We can watch this in real time now, every day, in our new abhorrent surreal reality parody. Look, for instance, how Trump clashed with Zelensky and it dominated the daily news for days. However, Trump's direct genocidal threat to annihilate whole of Gaza is not even reported on by many, or merely a side note. We must challenge these authoritarian turn head-on. My case should not be a warning, it should be a rallying cry. We must defend freedom of expression, especially when it makes governments uncomfortable, and even when it makes ourselves uncomfortable. We must demand an end to Europe's complicity in war crimes. No more weapons to Israel, no more funding for genocide and settler colonialism. We must build a mass movement that fights for true democracy, and one that is not controlled by corporations, war profiteers, and political elites. Something like the M25. We already have it. Anything really that goes against the war machine. Power structures are neither vertical nor horizontal, they are spiral, catching up on everyone along the production cycle. And they start with you. Build your community, connect, start an initiative, start with 2 people, and then grow. And most importantly, we must not be afraid, apathetic and believing as they tell us that we cannot change anything. As Grace was saying. Because that is what they want. They want us to be afraid, silent, and to believe that we are alone. But we are not alone. Every protest, every strike, every act of resistance brings us closer to the Europe we envision. A Europe that stands for justice, for peace, for the people, not for profits and war. They fired me to silence me, but here I am. Speaking out louder than ever. And I will keep speaking. I will keep fighting. And I know all of you will too. Because we will not let them take our voice. We will not let them take our rights. And we will not stop until we have reclaimed our Europe, the Europe for the people. And I want to outline to all of you, I'm just a normal person. I used to work as a civil servant, as I was saying, behind the desk in just a normal office, and joined the protests after work. The repressions and the wave of hate and doxing actually made me more well-known, more visible, and more influential. While not all of us can stand in the front lines, all of us are equally important to change the course of history right now. Every single person can make an impact, working from the sidelines or backstage, supporting in the way where your talents are. Maybe you're good with media, maybe with language, or maybe good with creating and collecting money. Use it. If we organize, if we show solidarity with each other loud and clear, we are powerful. The ruling class knows that. That's exactly the reason why they're using a sledgehammer to crack a nut. Like me. The system is weak, and that is precisely when it gets violent and reacts in massively exaggerated ways, as it is now. Hope, as Katie was saying, is a choice, right? But I would say it's a necessity, and it is not falling into your lap, as you were saying as well. It's a discipline. It needs to be practiced. Freedom is not handed to you on a silver plate either. It is fought for. There are common global struggles that need to be addressed if we want to keep inhabiting this beautiful earth. The human-made climate catastrophe, a growing number of horrible genocides and wars, an earth and its people that are being massively exploited by multinational corporations and the political elites are our global struggles. Thank you so much for giving me the stage today, and thank you for believing alongside with me in a better future. Let's get to work, fight for what we believe in: peace, justice, and freedom for all people, and a free Palestine.